Okay, good deal. So thanks everybody. We're going to talk a little bit about when you deal with Bob back here or somebody, one of his counterparts around the Pacific Northwest or around the country. Okay, so we're shooting for that CVSA inspection, right? We heard earlier from Dave about being involved in the Trucking Association. A little plug, if you're not aware of it, the CVSA, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, who does the training for most states and certifies how they're going to do that inspection. Where's their spring workshop? Does anybody know? Anybody know? Mike, where's it at? Portland, Oregon. So if you have the opportunity to avail yourself to the CVSA spring workshop, that's how they write the regulations on what's going to happen with your roadside inspection. That's a big deal. I think it's been a lot of years since they've been to Portland. So it started out here on the West Coast. It's a great opportunity because the last time I went through a roadside inspection, that's what I ended up with. Out of service sticker, and that's what we want to end up with, right? That's a bad day for the driver, for the company, for the shipper, for the industry, and I got to think it's not a real fun thing for that roadside inspector either. So we're trying to work on this roadside inspection thing. The first thing I'll say is to be prepared for when it's going to happen. It's not if we're going to have a roadside inspection, it's when we're going to have that roadside inspection and being prepared for it and preparing our drivers. So who in this room has been through a roadside inspection? Who's a driver? I'm still a driver. So a few of us have been through it. Is it a picnic? No, it's not fun. And it's a pain. Our anxiety goes up. We're nervous. We're thinking about, hey, did I get my logbook? Is it up to date? Where's my license? Is my fire extinguisher truck? All those things, because maybe I wasn't prepared for that moment. And that's when game is on, right? The game is on when we're on the side of the road and we're going to go through that inspection. We darn well better be prepared for it and know the regulations as a driver. So we think about this roadside inspection that's going to go on, that the inspectors have been doing for a lot of years, right? Our inspectors in every state, they do a lot of inspections and know what's going on, and they've got to change, and that they've got to get that data, and we've got to provide that data to them so they can conduct that inspection, make sure we're running legal. There's a couple different ways that can happen, and when you selected your ELD, or I'm just going to use the ELD as a generic term, though it seems like there's more AOBRDs because that's what some of the big carriers, as in PeopleNet and OmniTrack, some of their platforms, and a lot of the other folks, they're actually operating under AOBRDs and not the ELD regulations. But we've got to be able to transmit that data, and that's nothing new. Dave was talking about back in 2009, working on platforms. There's carriers and there's drivers that work for you now who've been dealing with electronic logs easily for 10 years. It's nothing new. Some of the roadside inspectors are and have been. They say, hey, I want to see that. I want to see how to get your logs. I want you to have them emailed in as what it used to be. I'm going to have you wait here. I want to see that last 7 days, and we'll take a look at that and see what's going on. Not every inspector is doing that currently, though. Has anybody been through a roadside inspection since December 18th? Anybody? So I made some notes. I have this cadre of drivers, about 10 drivers that I talk to, and I say, what's the word on the roadside? And let's see, I got one driver who's an owner-operator said, I'd gotten the thing 5 days before and it was on my passenger seat. He asked me about it, and I said, I got it over here on the passenger seat. I've got an ELD, but I don't know how to hook the thing up. And he let him go. He was very appreciative of that. Got other guys who, as soon as they know that they've got an ELD, they're okay with that, and the roadside inspector's not doing anything. Now, this is not just specific to Oregon. I should say this. Most of these guys are cross-country drivers I'm talking about. They've gone through inspections in multiple states. And I did talk to those 10 drivers I spoke to. One of them had been requested to be able to provide his last 7 days, and he was able to do that. So I think we're all kind of in this learning mode right now. In fact, I know we are. This refers to screen, show me what you've got, display it, because really what that roadside inspector, what Bob's talking about, he doesn't want any red flags, does he? He wants to be able to get through that and find those folks who don't want to comply. You folks are not the folks, that's not this group of people, is it? You guys want to comply, you're here, and I just want to take just a second offline here to say, I really appreciate Dave Gray putting this together. He doesn't have to do this. This is really a cool event that is free for everybody, and if you guys just take a second, give him a hand for him caring about safety. Because, right, we're all in this trying to do what's right, and if we all stand up and do what's right, we can sleep good at night, right? I mean, I've been that safety director. I'd like to sleep at night. I don't like getting those calls. Nobody does. Personal conveyance. We already talked a little bit about personal conveyance, and there's some new stuff coming up. I tell you, as a safety director, if you can, or a company owner, if you can get away with not using personal conveyance, do it. There is no regulation that says, thou shalt have personal conveyance. It's a nice to, part of keeping some of our drivers, and for business purposes, we need to have a personal conveyance policy to keep folks, but you do not have to have it. And the other thing is, and again, this maybe makes things a little complicated, you don't have to have it for your whole fleet. If you've got certain individuals for business purposes or for the runs that they're on, need to avail themselves of personal conveyance under, as Dave talked about, a short distance, unladen at this point, that's probably going to change. As the feds come up with it, allow that with those guys. You don't have to have a blatant policy, because the last time I checked, you're still buying those tires, putting the fuel through the engine, and paying all your road tax on that, which just, of course, just went up again. So if you can avoid it, do it. Some of the largest carriers that I know of in the Pacific Northwest are very cagey about personal conveyance. They don't want to do it. And the other thing they're not going to do is, we heard about adverse weather, which some of us, again, will get in a pinch and use. They don't use it. Some of the largest carriers have recognized these nuclear verdicts that we're going to allow adverse weather or whatever to let things stretch out. They just won't do it. They don't turn it on. They don't allow it because they're afraid, again, it's that sleep test at night if they're going to be able to sleep through something. So have that consideration too. I'm not going to drill down in it. Is everybody feeling good after that conversation about personal conveyance? So we kind of know how to lay that out. If you're going to use personal conveyance, have a written policy. Don't have to do it. There's so much interpretation, and I think it's a great way to get sued if something bad happens, quite frankly. And somebody else said that, it's an easy cheat button, right? I'm in Wilsonville and I want to get to my North Portland terminal, so I punch PC so I can get it home. Take the dang violation. It's okay to take the violation. Sometimes these things are going to happen where we have to get back and we're going to run out of hours. Those of us that operate, and this is pretty common now, and this is a fantasy of drivers, that, do you know how a truck, when it starts getting low on def, it'll start talking about derating, and you're going to get cut, your miles are going to cut and everything? There are drivers that think when their clock runs out on that ELD, it's going to shut their truck off. I'm not kidding you. I don't know, what am I going to do when I'm on the 405 and my truck shuts off because I run out of hours? That's what they think, because they haven't been educated properly. Having that conversation. Mentioned about the CVSA. When we think about some of the things that we can get in trouble for, not having a certified ELD on the website. I think, Dave, did you say 160 now? I quit counting at 100 because my head's just started to spin. But make sure you're on that national registry. That's important because that's one of the first check marks that's going to happen if something bad happens. And plus, it's security for your company, right? If you can't produce or transfer the data, I'll let you read through some of these. But if you think about what happens, the old acting dumb at the roadside, right? I don't know how to do it. I got a kick out of somebody who just sat down here. If you guys don't know Warren Simpson. Warren Simpson with the FMCSA. It's nice to see you, Warren.
Nice to see you, Joe. How you doing?
Warren and I first met in about 1993 when he came in with a court order to look at the records for the company I was working for because we wouldn't allow him on the dock. My boss was rather picky about the regulations back then. So it's always nice to see him in these more friendly terms. Failing to log into the device. This acting dumb just doesn't work. On the roadside, don't allow your drivers to do that, and we're going to give you a solution for that in just a couple minutes. Personal conveyance. Yard movement is something new, right? Are you using yard movement? Is anybody feeling good about the yard movement thing? Do you get that? So yeah, some of you folks are using yard movement. And the idea is, we were talking about, I've never been a garbage hauler, but I can tell you I've been around mills where you maybe go off duty and you're in that mill and you're told you need to move your truck 50 feet, and that was going to screw your time off. So it put you back on duty just because you moved. And that's kind of the basic of yard move. That's the idea of it. It's not for the open road. It's not from going between Milwaukee and Clackamas. The idea is you're inside of a protected facility and you're going to move the vehicle. So if they see that, you're going to have a problem. Past 7 days of logs. Got to be able to produce those still. Simple thing. And our friends at the roadside started warning us about this early on, is you got to have 7 blank log pages in your truck. So if you don't have that now, I get my nice brand new ELD. Make sure that you take one of those old log books that's blank and you put it in your truck, or you have 7 blank logs. Having written instructions in the truck is, again, a violation. Being able to navigate things. And again, unable to communicate with law enforcement about what that ELD device is. If you go through a roadside inspection and that roadside inspector asks again if you have an ELD, and you say, oh yeah, I got my ELD, it's right here. And they ask to see your hours of service, and all you do is want to pass that to them and hand it to them and say, here you go, figure it out. How's that going to turn out? It is not going to go well. And I can also tell you that I've got drivers who have gone through roadside inspections, who have dutifully, and the company's made sure they've got a very nice laminated, thick law enforcement instructions, and they've handed the device and said, here's the law enforcement instructions to the law enforcement folks on the side of the road, and that's not gone so well either. Yeah, it's not, even though that meets the requirement, when there's 160 devices, I can't really blame Bob for not knowing the intricacies of every one of them, right? So we need to know those as a driver. Every driver that I know has got some time to become an expert at this. Doesn't matter if he's a local, a long haul, a regional guy. The one thing as a truck driver I could always count on is having some free time on my hands. It may not be officially free. I may be sitting behind the wheel in line, or I'm waiting for it to be my turn, but I've got that time to do that studying. So don't underestimate the driver's ability to know this stuff. Keep the ELD manual in your truck. Have paper logs as a backup. Take the time to know what you're doing with law enforcement. Train your drivers at going through a roadside inspection. Question?
Joe, what are people doing in the event that you head out, you log in on your ELD device, and you're going along and all of a sudden it turns red for whatever reason, decides to just puke?
So, going down the road, everything's great, my life is blessed, and my ELD crashes. What do I do? So what we need to do at that point is, I personally would get off the side of the road, probably cycle the ignition, see if it's an electrical problem, but at that point, what I need to do is start creating a paper log at that point, probably call into either your manager, or if you've got access to the online system, which I think pretty much everybody has, to be able to recreate that day and then be prepared. And then I've got, does anybody know how many days? 7 days. 7 days I need to start worrying about getting that device either replaced or repaired. So does that answer the question?
But if you get pulled over an inspection station, where do you get those 7 days?
So I'm going to have to call either if I've got a dispatcher or somebody, we heard about the back room, or if I'm an owner operator, I know how to get a hold of part of the requirement to be a part of this registry is that they're going to have that data in the background, and to be able to either email it to me or to be able to have this third-party website that I could go to and access it. Does that make sense?
And so what do you present to the...
So what I would do is, well, first of all, I would just be square with them. And I'd say, hey, Bob, I was coming through Chehalis. My unit went down. I realized it. I started creating a log. I also called in, and here I've got this email. I can forward it to somebody if they want to take a look at my logs and see that I'm not making anything up. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Does everybody agree with that? Does anybody disagree with that process? Is that it? Okay, cool. So again, take the time with your new hires and really reinforce it with your existing drivers that we need to be polite. I know that's just a silly thing, but being a professional driver is sometimes I've got to act like one. I've got to do that with my customers and with my law enforcement partners. Understand, again, how to convey what my hours of service are. So how I'm going to do that. Now, we heard about training, right? We heard about videos, we heard about cards, we heard about all that stuff that we've got in our cab that's an ability to do that. Have your law enforcement card ready, but don't expect them to truly understand that device, because again, there's 160 of them out there. Oops. So, I like, again, Joe Darby, CDL, truck driver. I've been blessed to have a great career in trucking, but I still think like a truck driver. So what I need to do to learn something is to actually do it. So train your drivers on how to convey their hours to law enforcement, but then practice it. So I say stand out by the gate, do a random thing. If you're an owner-operator and you're working by yourself, you're probably going to have to either do this with somebody that's another driver while you're waiting at the port in Tacoma or something, and say, let's just kind of go through this. You be Bob Law Enforcement, and I'm going to be the driver, and we're going to go through this exercise to convey my hours of service and how I'm going to track those and how I'm going to get that. Because with that training, that driver will get comfortable with it. Because we can watch videos, we can read those cards, but until we have that time when we're standing on the side of the road and the law enforcement officer's asking, I need to see your last 7 days, what our response is going to be. And if we practice that, it's going to be like everything else that we do. It's going to be just as methodical as doing that roadside inspection. You know, we're required, that the whole 10% of the logs, right, we're doing. Why not on an annual basis do 10% of our fleet stopping guys as they're coming in the gate, or when we're encountering them at a shipper or receiver, and saying, let's go through this exercise, or ask John Salick to come over, or somebody else, and have that opportunity to share how to share your hours of service with that roadside inspector, so they understand what's going on. So they need to understand it. We need to practice it, probably practice it some more, and you'll get some really good feedback from your drivers. And I think that's it. So, any other thoughts, questions, roadside inspections? Remember that our drivers are get as much angst in them when they go through a roadside inspector as when we get that letter from the FMCSA saying they're come to visit, right? That's their visit. So let's prepare them for it, make sure they understand how to interact and to communicate, because it gives the opportunity for that roadside inspector, if we do a good job, to move on to that next guy who doesn't care about safety like you guys do. So thanks for everything. Appreciate your time this morning.